The Vatican's reversal to now allow transgender individuals to be godparents at baptisms is something the Catholic LGBTQ crowd noticed and is crowing about. Join us with the latest from the Eternal City, Church Militant's Rome correspondent, Dr. Jules Gomes. Jules, the Vatican's response to the dubia on baptisms that's really making headlines this week had many angles and opens up some changes on how things are done, puts a lot of stress on pastors. We'll be getting into that a little bit. What's the change LGBTQ crowd activists are now applauding?
Brad, Francis Di Bernardo, the co-founder of the very heterodox New Ways Ministry, has published an article on his website, and he talks about, he's trumpeting the fact that the Vatican, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, now the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, has actually done a massive U-turn, reversing a ban on transsexuals or transgender people being godparents, a ban that they themselves issued in 2015. Now, let me briefly tell our viewers what happened in July 2015. A person by the name of Alex Salinas, who was born a woman and then transitioned to a male, requested the parish priest of a church in Cadiz in Spain to be godparent to her two nephews. The parish priest, of course, said no. It went up to the bishop, who is Bishop Rafael Zornoza, and Bishop Rafael, a good bishop, said no. Everything exploded in the media, and Spain's Equality Commission intervened and called this hate crime on the part of the church. Zornoza, the bishop, was put under huge pressure. He buckled and he said yes. But meanwhile, he had already sent the matter to the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. And in September 2015, they replied and they said, no, it's not possible because this is a violation of fundamental Catholic teaching. Zornoza, the bishop, then wrote a pastoral letter on his website. We have a copy of that letter, and I have published it in our written story today on Church Militant. We spelled out all the details there. So this 21-year-old transsexual individual, was shattered, went to the media with all this. But the point is that the CDF, now the DDF, said no at that point, categorically. And now it is saying, well, maybe, yes. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. So, what we're talking about here, the CDF back then, now the DDF, both were under Francis' pontificate. Both happened during this pontificate. It wasn't the Middle Ages they said no to. It was in 2015 when Francis was Pope. Under him, the DDF, as you're saying, comes out with this no. So really, Francis underlining, approving this statement, was saying no to transgenders, and now the U-turn here that says, well, yes, in certain circumstances, putting pastors in a real conundrum. But we have to note here, Jules, canon law itself on godparents, it hasn't changed, at least as far as I know. They haven't changed anything in canon law yet. It's still there on the books. That it calls sponsors, the godparents are called sponsors in canon law. And it says canon 874, paragraph 1, quote, to be permitted to take on the function of a sponsor, a person must be a Catholic who has been confirmed, has already received the Most Holy Sacrament of the Eucharist, and here we go, and who leads a life of faith in keeping with the function to be taken on, end quote. And of course, that function is to help rear the child, to baptize in the Catholic faith, should the parents not be able to. Now, that code has not been removed, right? So pastors still need to take that into account, right?
Well, Brad, you're spot on, because in fact, the CDF, in its response to Bishop Zornoza, cited precisely the canons that you have just referred to. And Bishop Zornoza, of course, used this and said, yes, this person is not living in conformity with Catholic teaching. But moreover, Bishop Zornoza extensively quoted Pope Francis's recent encyclical Laudato Si, and explained beautifully, in my opinion, how if a person could not even respect the nature of his body, how could he be expected to respect the nature of God's creation? And he connected with the whole ecological motif in Laudato Si. Now, your question about canon law, Brad, brings us to the question of Italian law, because nobody in the media seems to have noticed this as yet, but Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has recently passed in the lower house, it's being debated in the upper house, the bill against prohibiting universal surrogacy. Italy already has a law banning surrogacy within the country, and the recent ruling by the DDF seems to be going against that by supporting, in a sense, surrogate couples. Even more interesting is the fact that the Meloni government has categorically almost stomped on local councils, saying that they are not to, in identity documents, they are not, at registration, for example, they are not to have parent 1 and parent 2 when registering a child, but they are to have father and mother. And if the second parent is a same-sex parent, that person's surname will not be included in the document. So again, there's a very big contradiction, interestingly, and it's fascinating that secular law, as being legislated by the Meloni government, seems to be far more Catholic than Pope Francis and Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernandez's recent dubia response to the dubia.
Yeah, we're getting into a multifaceted aspect of that dubia, because it's talking about baptisms of parents, homosexuals living together. For the same reason, are you going to rear this child in the faith? And it's very difficult to see that if you're living a homosexual lifestyle, how would that be? And canon law says itself that if this is not going to be taking place, whether you're just not living the faith yourself, or when I can't promise that the child's going to be reared in Catholic, understanding, then you're binding him in canon law by baptism to live a life that he's not being formed to live, and therefore baptism should be postponed. So, but back to this transgender, transgenders, so-called transgenders being godparents, it seems Fernandez himself, even making it more difficult for pastors in a sense, is saying, once he says, yes, transgenders in certain circumstances can be in there. Canon law says, well, they got to be living according to Catholic faith. And Fernandez says, well, pastors need to take this type of thing into an account on a personal basis. And he says, quote, however, in this same response to the dubia, however, since this task does not constitute a right, pastoral to be a sponsor, to be a godparent, pastoral prudence demands that it should not be allowed if there is danger of scandal, undue legitimization of the LGBT lifestyle, or disorientation in the educational sphere of the church community. And this child's not going to be reared in the Catholic faith, so end quote. So your take on that, and Jules, really just your pastoral experience in being there, doing this for many, many years with people. How do you square all those circles? I mean, you've got canon law saying they got to live lifestyle, and that's what the Vatican has said, that's what that canon law means, and that implies that transgenders aren't doing that. And at the same time, he starts off with saying, well, in certain circumstances, transgenders can. What do you, and then he comes back and says, but it's on the pastor to decide these things. What do you do, Jules, as you're standing there and a couple comes up and says, oh, I want my transgender, friend here to be the godparent of my child?
Well, Brad, honestly, I would be having a pastoral meltdown, a breakdown, very serious indeed. Because I would want to stand for the truth, want to stand for biblical and, church teaching. But then suddenly I would realize my bishop may not be on my side. And even more serious, the Pope may not be on my side. The doctrinal watchdog certainly doesn't seem to be on my side. Now, let me quickly say here with regard to, the clause about causing scandal. I've been talking to a number of people, and they think that was particularly inserted to give, to open the floodgates for these things to take place in European countries, particularly countries like Germany, where this, obviously doesn't cause scandal any longer. We've seen this happening. And so the Vatican can simply shrug their shoulders if there's an outcry from some faithful Catholics, and they can say, oh, well, it's not causing a scandal. And so what's your problem? It may cause a scandal in Kenya or Tanzania, but certainly not in Hamburg or, Munich. Now, coming back to my pastoral situation, when in my own pastoral experience, one of the redeeming factors when the Church of England was going through all this, before I swam the Tiber, the great relief was always the fact that when such legislation was passed, pastors were given a conscience clause. So if the priest thought that, remarrying a divorced couple or doing a gay blessing that had not yet come in at that time was okay, well, the person could opt out without any fear of a backlash or consequences. But this is not happening here in the Catholic Church under Pope Francis, and that would make me very worried indeed. In fact, I considered joining the ordinariate when I was a doctoral student at Cambridge, but today I would not want to do that because I would not feel protected. I would feel very vulnerable indeed. And by the way, I salute those very brave priests who will continue to remain steadfast to biblical teaching and to the faith that has been handed down from the apostles. So there we are.
Excellent, Jules. Thank you very much. Well, to say the ban has been lifted on transgenders being godparents, well, that's a fair statement. This will make it harder, as Jules spelled out, for good bishops to say no and priests to say no to potential godparents who are not living a Catholic lifestyle. It just will. It will also embolden not so good bishops to allow LGBTQ plus folks to be godparents. Instead of confirming the brethren, we get division. Pray much for this pontificate. But no, it will not have the final say on how Christ Church will be run in the future. Jules, thank you so much for spotlighting this story and bringing it into focus for us and being with us today.
Thank you, Brad.
Thanks again for watching today's episode of Rome Dispatch. This show is brought to you by donors like Real Estate for Life. If you're looking to buy or sell a home and want to support our mission, visit realestateforlife.org. Again, that's realestateforlife.org. Be sure to tell them Church Militant sent you. God bless.